Welcome. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sue Schirmer. I am a professional learning and leadership consultant here at Heartland and the facilitator of the statewide Future Ready Task Force. And together with AEA Prep and a number of people, we are finally seeing these data summaries come to fruition. And it's a pretty exciting day to be able to share these with you. So I'm going to get us started, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dave Ford, who led this work, and we'll continue to go there. So our agenda is to define the problem and the identified need, and then the process we went through, publication, and next steps. So one of the problems we had, as I'm sure you could all imagine, is that Future Ready is inconsistently defined. It's rarely measured in uniform ways, and it's just really, really difficult. Also, we've got data in a number of different places, and people have different levels of accessibility or access to those. And there are a lot of folks out there that have been trying to do the same thing in a number of different ways. If you look at all the different initiatives that are out there and the different ways that people define Future Ready, you can see some of the examples here on this slide. And then when you sit down to look at your data, you've got to go to a number of different sources, as you see, just some examples here. So what we decided was that we needed to do something in a way that would get us some more consistent information and in a much more collected spot. We have a lot of places that are defining Future Ready. You can see some of them here. And we have a lot of I think each one of these, yes, each one of these are links, and in a minute I'll put this slide deck in the chat. So we knew that we had this big need at the Future Ready Symposium, the AEA Symposium last spring. One of the things that we heard from many attendees was that we have all these different ways of sharing data, and why are we doing this? Why can't we have one that everybody can use? And I know for us here at Heartland, we said, you know what, we agree with that, and we think we need to do something different. So that's how we kind of came to be. Here's one from Central Rivers, a little bit different profile from Central Rivers. This is from, I believe, Mississippi Bend. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Dave Ford to chat a little bit about the process that we used.
Slide here in particular, we looked at these future ready, college ready types of existing measures. These really were kind of foundational documents in terms of what we used as a design team to really flesh out what were the things that we landed on in the final product here. Just kind of sharing that those links that were on that previous slide there, those were really kind of key pieces of research and evidence that we went back and looked at as we started. And those weren't the only ones, but those were some of the key ones that we knew that were being utilized around the state, and particularly within the AEA and LEA structure. So what I want to go through is about what the process looked like, how we came to get where we are, and then really being able to show where these are housed and what our next steps will be kind of in this process. So generally speaking, we had a pretty diverse group, a lot of different teams around this. Either at some point were either involved in the direct planning and design and or feedback and or all of the above. So several of those are listed here. Many of you participate on our statewide Future Ready task team. You were on your agency Future Ready team. We had several prep leads who were involved in this. And also we had several members of the Iowa Statewide Longitudinal Data System project team that includes some partners there. There are probably some other partners on that group, but these were the ones who actively participated at some point in time in that process. So the goal here was, we have a lot of different entities that are providing different ways to access and visualize and analyze data. So that was really important that we brought that large group of stakeholders together. So as this came out of the Future Ready Symposium in the summer, in May, that kind of in end of May, early June, this Future Ready Task Force had kind of identified this problem area that Sue discussed a bit ago. And as you can imagine, between that group of stakeholders, so in the summer work sessions, we met in July, and again, was just some difficulties with vacation and travel schedules. We were able to pull together a core team of about 10 to 12 or so from some of those groups on the previous slide. And we spent 4 afternoons digging into these areas. So the first couple really digging into like what was the problem that we were trying to solve and what were the potential solutions or outcomes. And then we dug in with a little bit of a smaller group about how do we pull all of this information together. Sue had mentioned a couple of those previous slides where we had a lot of different sources and locations where this data was currently being housed or staged, and how can we pull that into one location? And then the tough thing here, and a lot of kudos that we'll give out probably multiple times throughout this, Lindsay Rupp, who is a creative genius out of Heartland AEA. She really did a great job of making this concept come to life here. So after we put these together, we went through a fairly rigorous process to get feedback from all of these different stakeholder groups. We kept a kind of a protocol process for we would send out an iteration of the project and ask for specific feedback on each component. And then as that feedback came in, it was a lot of iteration of update the design, send back out, update the design, send back out. And we really got the interesting thing about the feedback process is we got very different feedback from the different groups, which we thought was super helpful. So let's just jump right into this here. This is ultimately the final product that you're seeing here on the screen. I'm going to share a little bit more in detail on this, but you can see it's a one-page document. This is something that created at the statewide AEA level, has statewide AEA color coding and branding assigned to it. We're going to dig into, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more on here, so don't worry about the size of the text, but I just want to give you a visual of what would be on the front and back of these, of this one-page document. So let's zoom right in here. You can see here on the top right of the screen, there is a little pictorial of what this page is, and the little white box is the part of this that we're looking at. So again, one of our goals here was to try to create a document that created some flow around some key future ready areas. So they were things that were related to maybe academic performance, things that we knew were predictive of other things within education, and particularly success and achievement. It was critical that we tried to find some data points that were across the preschool to post-secondary spectrum. So what these start with on the top right, these are the prep trend lines that you will typically find on the post-secondary readiness reports page. These were kind of recreated so that these would be at the district level. We do have a handful of districts in the state that those are typically published by high school. And we have some districts like Des Moines Public, Davenport, Cedar Rapids that have multiple high schools. So this was really intended to be a very broad balcony level district snapshot of this data. So you can see here, the top of this screen talks about post-secondary intent, followed by post-secondary enrollment, persistence, and completion. So within our state, and many of you probably know this, and I'm gonna say it again anyhow, the future ready goal that 70% of our workforce needs post-secondary education and training beyond high school. That's an economic development and a workforce development goal that has been embedded in code in Iowa. So our goal here is to do what we can in our sector to fill as much of that pipeline as is possible. And that prep trend line really helps us see what's happening with our students after they leave us, and then what we can do while we still have them. So we start off with preschool participation as one indication of kindergarten readiness. We know that there are others, followed by academic performance, and this gets into some more formative data with benchmarking on healthy indicator number 3, as well as our state assessment system for ELA, math, and science across the spectrum there. A couple of things that you'll note on this one in particular is that one of the goals of this was to provide probably enough information for people to be curious to go find and dig deeper to the original source data, almost like an advertisement, if you will. Because one of the things that we found in some of our use case scenarios with districts was, depending on the district leader or the district leadership team, or a building leader, a building leadership team, they generally tended to engage with a couple of these sources, but not all. So for example, the Iowa School Performance Profiles was a site or a source that folks who were designated as an ESSA school were much more likely to frequent than districts who were not. So they were finding their data from other places. So the goal here was to put together on one page something that would attend to that. If I go to the second, this is the lower half of that first page that you'll see again, kind of up here with this little white box highlight, talking about conditions for learning. Those are broken across the 3, 5, and 6, 12 spectrum. And also just noting that we are aware that 3, 5, and 6, 12 aren't necessarily exactly the same measures, but putting them together, there's some caution to be used there in terms of quote unquote comparisons, because they aren't the exact same instrument. But again, putting it together on the same page for districts to be able to see. To the right, you'll see chronic absenteeism, which is identified as students who missed more than 10% or more days of the school year, broken again out by grade level K5 and 6-12. And then the bottom half of this really gets a little bit more, as you get closer and closer to graduation, there's a little bit stronger relationship between some of these data points and whether or not a student will pursue and complete a post-secondary credential. So those include the percentage of students in grades 8 through 12 who complete their career and academic planning requirements, who graduate high school in 4 years, who complete a financial aid form during their senior year. And then the bottom of this is the ESSA component of the post-secondary readiness index that has to do with ACT, SAT participation and success, percent taking college level coursework in high school, and CTE concentrators. So again, kind of the goal, we know that this is, there were a lot of other things that we discussed. There were a lot of data points and a lot of student indicators. There were a lot of system indicators that we had a lot of discussion about how and where they may fit into this context. But this ultimately, after going through a lot of feedback sourcing, this is what we landed on. So what's on the back?
So Dave,
yes,
you might go back and explain the notes that are on there for as compared to the state of Iowa, because this is a state of Iowa one, and when they look at their individual.
Yeah, so similar to the Iowa School Performance Profile, they have this little dot that is designating the Iowa average. Because we are looking at the state of Iowa snapshot, the endpoint for every one of these data points is equal to the state average. When you get to a district version of this, for example, if the district is 38, you'll still see this red line with a red dot over on this side, and that's true for all of these. From a data standpoint, I think we noticed there were a couple of hiccups, maybe is the right word. So for example, what do we do in the case scenario where a district does not have a comprehensive high school? We have a lot of these data points on the bottom that will be left blank. And that's one of the things we hope to hear back from the field is what might we do in those situations? So having the data is one thing. The action that comes along with it is probably the greatest benefit of having something like this. So when working with districts, and this is by no means a guide, this is a recommendation. These questions are listed at the top. These were taken from the Iowa, kind of adapted from the 5-step continuous improvement process for schools. kind of with the hopes that this process would be more familiar to AEA and LEA audiences, so that we could look at, what is that first question, what does our current data tell us about our learner future ready outcomes? So you'll see there's a couple of pieces of languages that have been changed in the assess sector, but the rest of the questions are taken directly from the Iowa 5-step continuous improvement process for schools documents that are already on our AEA Future Ready site, as well as a lot of other places that lives. So we kind of see this step-by-step process as one in which a district school improvement team would sit and develop this together and respond to this together. The last thing that you'll see on here, and this is something that I really feel is a critical component to this, because most of the questions that I get, or maybe even some others who are on our team, often have, well, what do you mean by that? Where did that data come from? What is this exactly telling me? This data dictionary on the back will tell you, on the far left-hand side, it's the data element from the front. These are color-coded to the same colors for those that are on the front of the document. Within the title descriptor for each of these are all hot linked directly to the source where we may have gotten that data point. So you will see these in here. So for example, if I clicked on percentage who took the ACT, SAT, it's going to link me into the Iowa School Performance Profile page. In addition to that, it gives a fairly brief, in some cases, a little bit more detailed than other description of the data point that you're looking at. The idea here is that that you will have at the ready when you're working with a district, you'd have the answer if they say, so what do you mean by ISAS, PLM, ELA for academic performance? And it would tell you exactly what that data is, what it does or doesn't include, and when it was from. As we roll these out, we will be providing some feedback documents through the Future Ready team and through the AEA prep team to get ongoing feedback from both AEA and LEA users, so that we can make a kind of a 2.0 as we move forward. The long-term vision here is that instead of living in a Google Drive, that these would be available to be viewed and printed on a website, and ideally with some way to incorporate a sorting, and that's probably more of a further down the road vision, so that we could take these and then also click on some demographic groups and see how they would repopulate. Obviously, with some of our data partners, we have some rules and governance structures we need to follow, particularly with regards to redaction of some of those data points. But yeah, that's the short and long-term overview. And I know that we've shared quite a bit, and I'm going to guess that many of you are interested in getting in and looking at yours. So I think at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions and see what questions you may have. And actually, before I do that, I see Bev is on here. Bev, I'm hoping that maybe we can put you on the spot. Keystone AEA was able to do a little bit of a soft rollout with this. So Bev, I'm kind of hoping that maybe you can share a little bit of insight about how that process maybe went for you.
Yeah, so we first introduced it with we have a points of contact system for Future Ready. So all of our content area supports, as well as some of our special ed transitions. So we have a larger team, but the goal is for them to see how Future Ready data is, what that looks like in their own context, as well as how do we move it forward from the individual level. So we are going to be actually having an instructional services / core day where we're rolling out the data modules that came from the Future Ready task force that were talked about before. So grounding us in understanding each of the data points and how they relate to my individual job and my individual experience. So how do each of us play into the whole of Keystone? So that's kind of wave one, and Mark has more information on that. And it's also on the Future Ready website that was shown for the data modules there. So that was the first blush. At the end of our planning session, it was very brief, but really taking a look at these one pagers. So after that initial meeting with within all of the different regions, that's where this will go into our navigator teams. Navigator teams support each individual district within a region. We typically have teams of folks who support them. So it'll continue and making sure that we're having Future Ready ongoing conversations within all of our school improvement as well as our school teams, so that we're looking at that data and moving forward. So some of my points of contact are also on this. So if you want to add anything to that, feel free. But it's meant to empower and continue the conversation, as we said. And we provided a couple of pieces of feedback in how we want to, how we're going to be using that to the team, as well as just some of the questions that we had too. So as you're using them, putting your eyes on there based on the context that you have has been a really cool experience, because we all see something different in those PDFs. And then how can we make them better, and how do we make them a part of our entire conversation? The connections that were made specifically on the feedback we had was, how do they go into those ESSA conversations, how they're a great tool for that too. So lots of different ways for starting to use that information. So Brian's talking about, is there a way to run a filtered report? That's when we were going to be digging into more of the prep dashboards, the things that we can, that are kind of behind. So that's why we're also meeting as navigators too. So this is the public facing data. Here's what this is. And so if we need to run very specific reports, that's when that one-on-one time that's not so public, that's when we can run those reports and really have those deeper conversations. So does that make sense? It's balcony view, and then you guys decide and drill down to the grain size, all the way down to the individual student need.
Thanks, Bev. Are there any other questions? Yes, Sherry, you asked about the state level report, and no, we don't have specific AEA level reports, but that's a great piece of feedback that might be something we want to look into in the future.
Okay, so I created 9 rooms, and for those of you who are not affiliated with an AEA, just stay here in the main room, and we will have these rooms open for, let's just close these. How about after 10 minutes? If you're not back, we'll close them, but if you come back sooner, that's okay too. All right, so maybe just from a quick snapshot standpoint, we get maybe one spokesperson from 2 or 3 AEAs just to kind of share out some thoughts. So we could go around to all of them if people want, but let's at least get a few just to get the conversation going.
I'd be happy to start at Keystone.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Our team continues to have conversation around how we can make meaning of this into kind of day in and day out work. We're looking forward to our team coming together within instructional services and then our core team members. And like Bev introduced earlier, really digging into the data driver. And we thought that these profiles would really create maybe a sense of urgency to dig into this, and more of a purpose for digging into that data driver, as it's very general once they get into the data, but then they're able to connect within their own individual schools that they're serving. So we will continue to do that. That will be how we open the day, is for them to be able to take a look at this within their fingertips, and then dig into that data driver module. And then we are going to set up the expectation that we're connecting back to future ready data throughout the year, and have set up some timeframes or as guide points in order to do that. So we'll continue to provide feedback and continue to make sense of this as we dig in.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the best outcome of this is what you just described, is that someone looks at it, they're like, well, wait a minute, what's my building, right? Like, it forces them to want to go out and seek even further. So thank you for that. Let's hear from another one.
At Green Hills, we were discussing that LEA and AEA audiences, that would be just a need for a plan for both of those, knowing that we have teams of people looking at like ESSA designations, IDEA, DA information. We're already having conversations about profiles of districts and that kind of systems level conversation. So might be timely, but I think our action was reconvening a team for that kind of planning.
Thank you. Yeah, and while we didn't capture them all, the healthy indicators and the ESSA designation indicators, those were at the forefront of the team that looked at indicators so that they would have relevance in both of those spaces as they relate to future ready outcomes. particularly post-secondary credential attainment. Thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah, for
David,
Great
one thing
Prairie.
that,
Sorry,
go ahead.
Kevin.
Go ahead, Great Prairie.
For Great Prairie, we too talked about the different audiences that we want to get these in front of. And so how does it going to look with our instructional services teams? How can they find themselves in this work, as well as a future ready workshop or a way to bring in building leadership teams, and to also how we're going to get the word out that they exist, and how are we going to share, and those kinds of things. Kind of the marketing piece.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing that I would encourage you to do is take stock of this internally as an agency. These were not intended to just say, send out to a district and say, hey, check this out, let us know if you have questions, right? Like the idea is use those collaborative inquiry questions on the back to engage some discussion between your whatever school improvement facilitators, regional administrators, fill in the blanks of who in your agency that might include, to have some discussions and some engagement together with the LEAs. Thank you. I thought I heard someone else going. Didn't know if it was.
David, this is Kevin at Heartland. We actually do have a tentative timeline and how it rolls out. And one of our first stops is with curriculum directors and superintendents and special ed directors. We just feel they need to be aware that this is out there and how it can be used before we have our staff maybe talking to their staff in conversations and they're not aware. The other thing that came up in our group, which I hadn't really thought about before, is someone noticed one of the districts was an outlier in one of the data points, meaning they were having a lot of success. So, you know, why is that? What's maybe the story there that could be told to help other districts?
That's a really great point. Yeah, making sure that both ends of the equation are aware of what's coming at them before these go out would be helpful. So, yeah, good point. Thanks, Kevin. Any others who haven't shared yet? Just initial thoughts.
Dave, we talked about pretty much a very similar topic point, which is sharing it with who to share it with and how to get it out there. We had a little discussion on sharing it with BLTs. I think somebody just mentioned that, and kind of, you know, delivering it in that way so that there's an overview. I think that one thing that came to my mind is a conversation I think we had in our in-house Future Ready team is, you know, a lot of people don't understand how Future Ready ties in at all levels. And I think this might be another way to kind of outline that Future Ready is all of it. And I think seeing it in a visual way would help them or help those that don't see the ties be more understanding or be able to make those connections a little bit better. So, but pretty much the same conversations that are going on in our group too.
Yes. Thanks, Cassie. I don't know if we still have any reps from Northwest Prairie Lakes or Central Rivers. My boxes are very small on my screen. If anyone who's from there wants to report out, that'd be great.
I'll just add, this is Carrie from Central Rivers, that we talked about what we currently have and how this could be, how it fits into the scheme of things, what's similar, what's different. And then we just are going to need to take some time to process that, to figure out what's next, because it's great information to have. So thank you.
All right. Well, I'll kind of close here with, and I'll turn things back over to Sue. If you come across some issues with a particular district or a question that you have, please let me know. You know, trying to publish out 350 of these in short order with automation from a system is ripe for the possibility of overlooking something, right? So kind of relying on you when you're working with a district. If you see something that seems out of whack or a missing data point, a couple of things just to share with you. Usually if something is no data available, we will obviously look into every one of those if you have those. But these are things that were reported by the district, typically to the department and or other entities. So if a data point is missing, it's that they didn't necessarily provide that in its entirety to the reporting source. So that could be one. A couple of other things as a point of note, we saw some very wildly different numbers in the career and academic planning, the ICAP percent completion rates. The way that those are reported to the department, those are numbers that are, and then we also use enrollment data to calculate percentage completion. And we've shared back with some of the folks at the department who oversee that we had almost 25% of school districts in the state had well over a 100% completion rate. So we truncated all of those at 100, but we also had several with 0. It meant that they probably didn't likely report during the pandemic. So we know that some of those anomalies exist, but if you have questions about a particular district, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will look into each one of those because the best thing that we can do is make sure that these are as timely and accurate as is possible, and kind of take it from there. So if you have, like I said, if you've got questions or if you want to just give some feedback, hey, we rolled this out, please plan on doing that internally in your agency, also through your Future Ready team, so that those can come back to our statewide team for further discussion down the road. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to turn things back over to Sue to close us out here. Thanks for coming.
All right. And I guess just to wrap things up, I just want to again reiterate thank you to Lindsay Rupp, who put these together in a really easy to read format. And thanks to Dave for leading the charge on this, and everybody else that was on the team that contributed, and whatever it is, if it's feedback or whatever point you had, but Dave really led the charge on this, and I really, really appreciate that. I think you can see that this is, while it's not the be all and end all, it's a nice door opening to have those further discussions with districts. So thank you all very much. If you want a copy of this recording after we clean it up a little bit, we will make that available through the AEA Prep and Future Ready leads in your area. So thanks again and have a great weekend, everybody.